Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jacob Bowers, and today it is my great privilege to introduce to you the Carthage Project. Before we begin, I'd like to go over the simple itinerary of this presentation. I will be starting with opening arguments, and then once I'm finished, I'll pass the baton over to Isaac, who will be handling political considerations. He will then be followed by Tam, who will be dealing with station architecture, followed then shortly after by Nathan, dealing with habitability. Mason will come up next, dealing with the drone systems, and then finally, Thomas will end with financial considerations. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. We all have dreams of man's future in space, but out of the countless plans and projects, why should anyone dedicate time, money, and resources towards ours? Well, we at the Carthage Project believe that there is an opportunity on the table that might literally be worth its weight in gold. An era is ending. The ISS is being decommissioned, leaving a space station-sized hole in near-Earth orbit. This hole will not be open for long as America's geopolitical rivals jostle to take that position. Along with that, we have a budding space economy that, put together, is just too geopolitically important and economically lucrative to simply leave on the table. So, how should America go about ending the stagnation of space development and get maybe a step or two ahead in this new space race? The solution is infrastructure. Space infrastructure will lower the barrier to entry that has handicapped space development so far. It will decrease risk and increase confidence in future space enterprise. It will generate tangible influence for America and her partners. If you get to build a road, you get to decide where it connects and who's allowed on. This, of course, then raises the obvious question, what type of space infrastructure are we talking about? And we at the Carthage Project believe that America should develop a space station designed to facilitate transport and commerce. It is our mission statement at the Carthage Project to develop and deploy an American space station in low Earth orbit for use as a primary pit stop for all future colonial, commercial, and scientific enterprises. Transitioning over to the gritty details of the project, the Carthage station itself will be built using a modular design very reminiscent of the ISS, so modules will be launched off-world, then constructed and assembled in space. If you look at the bottom right, you can see a mock-up of our station. So it has a center axis surrounded by a von Braun wheel. So of course the von Braun wheel is designed to generate an artificial gravity using centrifugal force. There will be more on that later in this presentation. It is designed to operate with minimum 5 crew members, but can easily fit up to about 8. 2 will be working on the drone fleet and 3 will be working on regular station maintenance. The fundamental problem that infrastructure like Carthage is trying to solve is logistics at its core, trying to get stuff from point A to point B. An example that we use currently is if you want to ship something from Beijing to San Francisco, do you fly or sail? Well, according to the World Bank, it's up to 12 to 16 times cheaper to move it by sail than to fly it over. So, in most cases, you're going to take it by boat. And if you put in infrastructure, you're able to reduce all future costs. It is an upfront cost, but hopefully it pays off in the long run. A great example, of course, is the Panama Canal, but you could go on and on with millions of examples. The name Carthage comes from, of course, the city of antiquity, which gained its power and influence not through natural resources that it had, but because of its location and its ability to act as a port of rest when you were moving the valuable silver from Iberia over to the Phoenician heartland in the Levant. Moving on, here we have a rough timeline on how we hope things go for the Carthage project. So we hope that we can get congressional approval by 2024, and then we can really begin our mission preparations in earnest. Then by 2028, we can begin the first of 8 launches every half year at that point. So then by the end of 2032, we should have a fully constructed station. We will have a little bit of wiggle room. We do plan on a few more launches in case a previous launch fails or we need to move up more personnel and more equipment. And by 2033, we should be open and beginning to do regular missions. And then by 2034, if all goes according to plan, hopefully possible expansions. But in order to keep this presentation brief, we will not be discussing those. And now we get to the part of the presentation I'm sure everybody's just been dying to talk about, the price tag. So let's rip this bandage right off. The asking price of the Carthage space station is $84 billion. Now this is absolutely a pretty penny, but in terms of space stations, it's not unheard of. We're asking for roughly half the cost of the ISS. We believe that we can get away with making it significantly cheaper by creating a smaller space station. So the less material you need up there physically, the less launches you need to send it up there. We're going to be using private contractors who will hopefully mitigate the launch costs. We will be also using the newly developed technologies and knowledge gained from the ISS to hopefully mitigate some of the cost. And the money is going to be going primarily to these 4 bullet points here in roughly descending order. So obviously we have the launch costs, which are a huge concern. And then of course we have Earth systems, so the infrastructure, the research and development, the personnel costs, and our media team all are going to require a significant amount of cash to work properly. And of course the station material and station design, development, and construction is going to be significant. And then finally we have, of course, the drone fleet. In order to make this an easier pill to swallow, we plan on diversifying our funding as much as possible. So obviously the US federal government is going to have a vested interest in making sure that this project is successful. So the federal government has plenty of agencies, in particular DoD, Space Force, NASA, the Department of Commerce and Transportation obviously have reason to be involved into this project and will benefit greatly from it. Partner nations, so the European Union and many East Asian states obviously have, who won't be able to create their own stations, could definitely partner and help construct this one. Private contractors, I think, will have a vested interest because once the station's up and running, many of them will probably use them frequently, and those who help the development and construction of the station will have precedence over those who don't. And then of course philanthropists, everything from small to large dollar donations will absolutely be accepted. And then once the station's complete, we want to do something that no station's been able to do and actually generate some tangible value. So in particular, space tourism, space-based refueling, international partners, so having kind of an astronaut program where you can basically purchase a seat for a little while on the Carthage station, and of course help developing space industry in a more broad general sense with things such as our drone system. Space industry, of course, is a really generalized term. Primarily, we're talking about satellites at this point. This is obviously where most of the global space economy is at, but as time progresses, energy production, tourism, mineral extraction, defense, and scientific inquiry will all have their own time in the spotlight, and also will be able to generate some revenue for the United States and for the funders who helped build the Carthage project. Before I finish, I'd like to make one real quick note about the strategic considerations that we put into the Carthage project. Carthage is not a military installation. It is designed to be an economic hub for the peaceful development of space. But by having the ability to support American and partner missions in space without having to use ground-based systems will be invaluable to American space security. And with that, I will pass the baton over to Isaac.
Hello, my name is Isaac Ludington. I'm a political science student, and I'll be talking to you today about the political factors relating to the Carthage project. With NASA's recent announcement that the space station's mission will be ending in 2031, many of the people involved in space missions currently are concerned about mission longevity. So the problem that the Carthage project is facing is how to maintain ongoing support for the Carthage project, given it will be a long-term program and the programs without ongoing support get canceled. So we are dealing with how to make sure that the Carthage program continues into the indefinite future. To accomplish that goal, the Carthage program is proposing to form a political action team, or PAT team, on Carthage that'll consist of a small staff that's dealing with the mission longevity problem, as well as issues of politics. Our two main focus areas for them will be government affairs and treaty compliance, the domestic and international concerns, and their focus will be ensuring that the Carthage mission continues to have support and will stay in action into the ongoing future. We know that foremost concern for some people is cost, so we'll be getting into that first. For Carthage's political affairs team, we'll be planning to hire 2 public affairs officers off the bat. Those come with an estimated cost of $100,000 each per year. That's in line with the current average NASA salary for public affairs officers. The proposed salary of $100,000 for our program is above the $76,000 starting wage for public affairs officers at NASA, but accounts for the added treaty compliance duties. It will be a larger job position. Additionally, we have a stipend there for travel and expenses. That'll come out to $12,500 per officer. That's to cover transportation to and from Washington, D.C. from our HQ, as well as for any potential travel abroad to meet with international or private partners. That comes out to a total cost of about $225,000 per year for the political affairs team. We don't believe that is a large cost, especially for a staff that will be getting paid less than the current average for NASA's public affairs officers. Now that cost is out of the way, we can look at the actual duties of our political affairs team. Our political affairs team will be charged with ensuring that there is support in Congress and the executive branch in the United States, no matter who is in power. So our officers will be working in a bipartisan manner with members of both parties and from both ideological factions. They'll be making sure that the priorities that currently are met by our program continue to be met, as well as identifying if those priorities change and how the mission should change to meet those. Currently, we feel that our mission does a good job of meeting the priorities of both of the major factions. For liberals, the Carthage project reduces the initial investment needed for programs. So this enables future research to go on at lower cost, which is a priority of the liberal faction. Additionally, it is designed with international cooperation centered. This will be done heavily with international partners. It will also assist smaller countries in developing space programs. And lastly, on this side, it allows greater regulation of the space industry. By making sure that our private partners are following our rules, we can keep space safer, a priority of the liberal camp. In contrast, on the conservative side, we're meeting their priorities, especially on the defense side, given that the Carthage program will be directly in partnership with the Department of Defense. We believe that will strongly highlight the military-focused concerns of the conservatives. Additionally, this will be an exclusively U.S. project. And lastly, it prioritizes public-private partnerships, a strong priority of more market-focused conservatives in Congress. Lastly, I'll be looking at the treaty compliance duties of Carthage's political affairs team. This largely has to do with ensuring that the mission is compliant with the 4 primary UN space treaties. Those would be the Registration Convention, the Liability Convention, the Rescue Agreement, and the Outer Space Treaty. They're on the slide here if you want to take a moment to look at them, but those largely have to do with who has liability for space launches, how do you register those launches, making sure that bodies in the solar system are used for peaceful purposes, and determining who and how you are required to rescue if a spacecraft is in danger. Our Carthage team will be in charge of registering all of our launches and orbiters in compliance with these treaties, with ensuring that we are meeting all safety requirements underneath them for all of our launches and deorbits, and most importantly, ensuring that as a DoD partner, we are ensuring compliance with the Outer Space Treaty, especially on matters of weapons of mass destruction, because we do not intend to bring the U.S. into violation of the Outer Space Treaty. Thank you very much, and I'll hand it off to our next speaker.
Hi, I'm Tim Gilker, and I can run you through the station design for the Carthage project. One of the big problems with space is the lack of gravity. This can cause a lot of health problems for the astronauts while they're in space and also while they're returning. How do we get around this, and how do we keep our astronauts as safe as possible while in space for longer periods of time? Here's our solution. Carthage is going to be made up of three main components: the cylinder, the wheel, and the solar panels. The cylinder and solar panels will remain stationary while the wheel rotates around them to simulate gravity at an Earth-like level. We believe that simulating gravity is the best way to avoid some of the health problems associated with weightlessness while in space. Simulating gravity would allow astronauts to remain in space for a longer period of time. This would also decrease the health problems that are associated with weightlessness and the return to gravity when astronauts return to Earth. There are a variety of health problems associated with weightlessness, such as muscular atrophy, calcium deterioration, and a variety of brain issues when one returns to gravity back on Earth. Simulating an Earth-like gravity would avoid these problems and be the safest and most comfortable route for us to take for our astronauts, especially if they're going to be up there for longer periods of time. Potential complications with the Carthage project's design are that with most large wheels, the balance of the axis is extremely important. Any shift in mass, even no matter how small, could cause the wheel to wobble dangerously. One solution to this is to use water as a ballast. This would mean sending the water around through the plumbing system to keep the wheel balanced as it's needed. This solution would allow existing systems to help take care of the problem, and it would keep the wheel balanced and safe. Again, here are the three main components of the Carthage design. There's the cylinder, the wheel, and the solar panels. Carthage will be brought up modularly. The cylinder will be brought up in 3 pieces, and the wheel will be brought up in 3 pieces, and the solar panels will be brought up with the sections of the cylinder that they go with. The sections of the wheel will contain an exercise segment, quarters for the astronauts, a kitchen, restrooms, a farm, the drone control, as well as the mission control and communication center. The Carthage cylinder modules will be sent up in 3 pieces. The first piece will be the wheel connector and the electrical bay section, which is the middle section here, and the main port and fuel silo section, and the secondary port and drone hangar section will be sent up separately after the first piece. The wheel connector section will be sent up first to allow for the connections in the wheel to be brought up soon after, as well as to allow for the port sections to be added on whenever they're needed. The materials used in any spacecraft have to be carefully chosen for their strength and their weight. For the exterior of Carthage, we will be using titanium, Kevlar, and high-grade steel. These metals are all strong and puncture resistant, which will help keep the spacecraft and the astronauts safe while up in space. These metals are also lightweight for the strength that they have, which is another important quality of space travel. You have to keep everything light, which is why for any interior sections, we will be using aluminum, which is a much more light metal. So for any internal metals, we will be using aluminum, and it will be safe because it will be protected by heavier, stronger metals. These choices were made to keep the outside as strong and puncture resistant as possible, to keep safe against any space debris, but also to keep the spacecraft as light as possible when it comes to the design. So how big is this station going to be? The cylinder, where the ports are, as well as the fuel, the electrical bay, and then the drone hangar, is going to have a diameter of 10 feet and a length of 100 feet. This is to leave room for all the necessary sections, but also to make sure that the astronauts can move through it safely. The cylinder will not be part of the spinning section, so while astronauts are in the cylinder, they will feel the effects of gravity. The wheel's diameter is 72 feet. This is including the section in the center where the connectors are. The habitable section forms a ring around the outer section of the wheel, and the diameter of that is 34 feet across. And the math. So to get the RPM to simulate Earth-like gravity, we started by calculating the velocity, And to get that, we needed to use the measurements of the station. From there, we went to the angular velocity, and then to the rotations per minute. And we need about 5 rotations per minute to simulate Earth-like gravity. We propose getting to this speed by using thrusters along the outside of the wheel to keep it up at the speed we need to simulate gravity. And we believe this would be the safest and most comfortable way to keep our astronauts in space as long as possible. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Nathan Bailey, and today I will be presenting on the habitability requirements and systems that will be utilized on the Carthage spacecraft. And in doing this, I will bring in some citations from Irene Schlock's Integrated Design Process Model, or IDP model for short, for space habitability, and then also bringing in some new ideas that we have following NASA regulation for the spacecraft. So what are the current issues that spacecraft have in their efforts to make the craft more habitable? And these fall into 3 categories: team, human environment, with human-machine environment interactions, and concurrent design with user-centered approach. And as you can see in the diagram to the left, these 3 components are not currently working very well together, sadly. All of the components that are shown in yellow are currently missing in current space missions, and they do not provide the final user-centered design, which overall will make the spacecraft more habitable. And so we face the challenge of producing a high habitability factor astronaut living experiences for long-haul missions. So, these missions are very long, and we need to ensure that we can create the most habitable mission possible to have a positive outcome at the end. And so through our development and deployment of Carthage, we hope to fulfill the habitability requirements formulated through NASA's Spaceflight Human Systems Standard, which is a long document that essentially just describes all of the things that spacecraft should do or are required to do for them to be habitable spaces. But we want to go beyond that and see what we can do to improve upon NASA's requirements. And then, of course, in the next slide, I will be describing what a habitable space is through the integrated design process. So what is a habitable space? A habitable space it can actually be figured up as an equation that can be measured as a combination of quality of life in any living system, the system's usability, and the system's performance. Through usage of an integrated design process, as you can see on the right here in the table I provided from Schlock's thesis she wrote on this, if there are high habitability factors through the 4 main types of habitability functions, if they all work in cooperation, this can produce a feedback loop where positive habitability factors equal or indicate even greater positive human factors, which will then lead to the continuing of a positive mission accomplishment for Carthage. And NASA provides detailed requirements for these space missions in its Spaceflight Human Systems Standard, which I mentioned before, which will further be split up into 4 categories that can provide into this feedback loop. And so an integrated design process essentially, as you can see with the yellow here for new knowledge and human factors, shows that these are currently missing and that they need to be integrated into the design from the get-go before the mission even begins, so that we can continue to have this positive feedback loop of new knowledge, new human factors, which can then be led into a new space mission and lead to higher habitability. Habitability overall can be expressed through the equation that I have here on the bottom right, where it's a combination of operational factors, physical factors, psychological factors, and sociocultural factors. And when you combine these up, you have the overall HF output, or HMF output, which symbolizes habitability factors. And if we refer back to the last slide, this is what will be implemented into this feedback loop for future missions. As you can see with this figure here on the left provided by Schlock's thesis on space habitability, each of these components is critical to the astronaut or visitor's experience on the spacecraft. And so when these habitability factors are inputted into the astronaut's experience, the output is then a better quality of life, better performance on the station, and more safety. So in the first component of the habitability factor equation, we must first look at operational factors, right? So if you don't have an operational ship, you won't have an operational crew, is how I see it. And so we've designed this mission to be a mixed purpose mission, wherein the work and life balance is appreciated, and where astronauts can sleep not in the same area that they work in, but in an area where they can communalize with other astronauts and people on board and really better enjoy their experience. And so what we've planned to do is utilize the center cylinder as the main workspace, with the exception of the hydroponics farm that I will be getting into in the next slide. So this will be home to really all of the workplace type things. This will be home to the drone hangars, the refueling silo. This will be home to the research areas, technological areas, really everything that current spacecraft use, such as the ISS, with the exception of the drone hangars, will be located in the center cylinder. This center cylinder will not utilize the simulated gravity that we discussed in the last presentation, but rather this will operate very similarly to how spacecraft such as the ISS operate. So it won't be much different from what we see today. However, the gravity simulated wheel, the von Braun wheel, which was originally designed by our team member Tam Gilker, this will be a very new concept in space travel. This will facilitate all of the sleeping quarters. This will facilitate the kitchens and communal areas, the small library, the sustainable hydroponics farm. This will be home to the exercise areas and really everything that you would not usually find in a workplace. So we've done a very diligent job of separating the work areas from the operational areas to ensure operation goes smoothly and there can be a good balance of work and life. Of course, the next factor is physical factors. And so we must keep in mind, of course, that NASA has very stringent requirements about the physicalities of living in a space station. Even with simulated gravity, there are so many risks with space travel that we must remember this when planning out how the physical factors of our station will operate. So we must remember that NASA has a food caloric content need requirement of 3,035 calories per day per astronaut, and an additional 200 calories per day if engaging in extravehicular activity or EVA tasks. So essentially, if the astronaut were to go outside of the craft for any purpose during the day, they need to be ensured an additional 200 calories in their diet per day. NASA also writes that crew members must have the ability to eat with each other if they would like. The food waste systems must be separate from the food prep areas to prevent cross-contamination. And then, of course, as you can see in this picture here, albeit we're doing this a little bit more intensely, we will be utilizing an onboard hydroponics farm to lower the cost of food on board, lower the need or decrease the need for shipments being brought to the station, and this will also overall make the station a sustainable living space. So, of course, we must also remember that humans are humans even in space, and that we need to facilitate hygienic needs and waste management needs. And so one of those is to make sure there is always an adequate supply of feminine hygiene products for females on board in all of the hygiene stations. We must also allow for simultaneous urination and defecation, and this can be found in NASA Standards 3001 Volume 2 on page 94. Especially for new astronauts, waste management can come as an issue when you're getting acquainted to the new types of gravity, albeit simulated or lack thereof. There is the potential for issues to come up on board, so the management system must allow for simultaneous waste excretion. And then, of course, as highlighted in Harrison's spacefaring book that I mentioned earlier, as well as in NASA's regulations, it is preferred that hygiene stations such as showers and personal hygiene areas where things such as deodorant and other bodily hygienic needs are separate from human waste exposed areas. So this basically means we will not be having the showers in the same places as the waste management areas or waste excretion areas. So the toilets and the showers will not be in the same room. And we feel this will be very beneficial in boosting the morale in our habitability physical factors. So psychological factors and improvements is something that we found we were able to do a lot with. And so psychologically on board, when we think of a spacecraft, we think of it as a very condensed, tiny, kind of secluded space. But we hope through a new development we can fix this. And so we hope to improve the mental health of all crew members through the usage of every stateroom having a digital LCD window with a touchscreen that follows NASA's window optical properties requirements that can be found on figure 8.6.2 on page 124 of the Human System Standards. These will be used with mixed functionality as a crew member info panel and a sensory device. So the way this is going to be designed is that there's going to be the normal windows you would find on everyday spacecraft, such as the ISS, right? But we will also have in front of it a LCD screen that can function as a better window, as well as a multi-purpose touch device, kind of like on the back of an airplane seat, how there's different things you can touch and utilize. So this will slide up and down like an airplane window does, but over the glass that is already on the window. So the astronaut can look out the real glass and see their actual view out of the window, or they can hold this LCD screen over, which would probably be about 2.5 feet tall, over the glass screen. And so this will, as I mentioned, provide a better view. You could probably switch through these views to get different angles from the spacecraft as well as different areas of deep space. We could use these LCD screens to provide digital media from Earth, and this will act as a television screen. We can program them with media intended to aid with sensory needs. And these will also follow every glare prevention regulation that NASA has by utilizing an LCD screen. And this will also prevent light intrusion from the glass window if needed. Existing requirements for NASA missions include private sleeping quarters for everyone, acoustic and sensory monitoring, and sound levels must not rise above 10 decibels above the background ambient level. And then, of course, as always, NASA will be holding mental health evaluations by the NASA Behavioral Health and Performance Group. Finally, sociocultural factors. And so this is something we hope that the LCD window system on Carthage can really help with. And so on board, we hope to utilize a lot of different new ideas that can improve this. We hope to provide internet connectivity, potentially with the usage of the screen of a two-way video call system. We also hope to facilitate religious and cultural needs of various backgrounds, such as including a compass pointing to the location of Mecca, Saudi Arabia for Muslim praying on this screen. We also hope to include screensavers with artworks from various cultures. And then, of course, in the small library on board, all major religious texts are to be available for non-secular crew members. We also hope to provide a catalog of music and film for crew members to utilize, and a window to utilize media similar to airline seatback screens, albeit larger.
So we will make Carthage the most habitable spacecraft ever built by utilizing these 4 very crucial factors in incorporating the IDP feedback loop that Schlock provided. And so I would like to thank you so much again for your time and consideration, and I will move it over to the next presenter.
Hello, my name is Mason Delakis, and I am a senior chemistry major here at SIU. Today I'll be discussing the inclusion of a drone fleet aboard the Carthage station, intended to be used as a cost-effective method for the advancement of human knowledge regarding our solar system. So why drones? This comes down to some major issues related to current methods of interplanetary exploration. First of all, interplanetary exploration is expensive. A fleet of unmanned drones would be significantly cheaper to build and launch. Next, sending completed spacecraft into the void from Earth involves a lot of risk in addition to its high cost. If conditions are not perfect, disaster can strike. The drone program attempts to mitigate the cost and risk involved by constructing and launching each drone in orbit aboard the Carthage station. Also, current unmanned spacecraft can only be used once, resulting in high-cost equipment being lost upon mission completion, and possibly adding to the debris pollution in space. The proposed drones are capable of being reused, reducing the cost of missions further, and avoiding contributing to the problem of space debris. Although drones are being evaluated for use in the exploration of planetary bodies, there are currently no known programs involving their use in interplanetary exploration. To begin the discussion of what is required for this program, we will start by discussing the personnel. Arguably the most important part of the program is the personnel. The team is expected to consist of 2 aerospace engineers and 2 programmers, each of which will be trained as astronauts. These members will be required to design, program, and construct the drones. Moving on to propulsion. An ion thruster is believed to be the best method for propulsion, as the propellers commonly found on drones do not work in space due to a lack of air. According to Wikipedia, ion thrusters ionize a neutral gas, producing a beam of positive ions, which generates thrust. Xenon gas is commonly used as the fuel for this type of propulsion. And for reference, the N-Star ion thruster that was used aboard NASA's Deep Space One spacecraft is pictured at the right. To power the ion thruster and other technology aboard the drones, solar energy is likely the best option. Solar energy will be harnessed through solar panels attached to the drones. This does, however, present a potential challenge. Solar radiation beyond Jupiter's orbit is likely insufficient to power the equipment, which would limit the range of missions. As a result, a secondary power source may need to be considered for inclusion aboard each drone. On to the design of the drones. The proposed design for these drones is similar to that of the MQ-9 Reaper military UAV, which is pictured on the left side of your screen. Key differences between this drone and the drones aboard the Carthage station include the substitution of the rear propeller with an ion thruster, replacement of the wings with solar panels, and the addition of small thrusters for maneuverability. This design, however, is subject to change depending on input from the program's team members once they are hired. One of the primary features of these drones is that they can be completely customized. Since each drone will be individually built, they can be equipped with a variety of instruments to complete different tasks. And this also allows for multiple drones to be launched at one point to complete separate missions. The 2 main uses for these drones come down to research and engineering purposes. In regards to research, drones can be sent to observe, photograph, and analyze different planetary bodies within our solar system, expanding our knowledge of the universe around us. Beyond gathering data, drones can be outfitted with specialized equipment and be used to carry out repair missions to other man-made technology in space. The drones also have the potential to be used for military operations if the need were ever to arise. The benefits of this program relate to cost, efficiency, and risk. As mentioned earlier, the construction and use of the drone fleet would be significantly cheaper than other currently employed methods for exploration. The ion thruster system has a long lifespan, allowing for extended use of each drone. Drone missions operate independently as a part of their programming, requiring very little human involvement to carry out missions. And finally, the drones are capable of returning to base upon mission completion, where they can be repaired if necessary and reused. Now, no technology is ever perfect. It is recognized that the implementation of this program could be met with some challenges. However, all anticipated challenges, such as the potential power issue discussed earlier, have objectively simple solutions. The only other anticipated problem is that the current method of launch from the Carthage station is inefficient. This inefficiency could be improved upon via the addition of a magnetic railgun aboard the station. Per Wikipedia, a railgun uses electromagnetic forces to launch high-velocity projectiles. The diagram in the bottom right of your screen demonstrates how this would work. The magnetic railgun would allow for the drones to accelerate to their maximum velocity at a much faster rate, reducing fuel requirements and mission time, as well as any risk that might have been associated with launch out of an airlock. To conclude, the estimated cost of this drone program is broken down in the table in front of you. It was roughly estimated that this program would cost around $1 billion, but this value is subject to change. The finances of the Carthage station will be discussed in detail next. Thank you very much for your time.
Hello, my name is Thomas Kofer. I am a mathematics major, and I will be discussing Carthage finance. In this presentation, I will be discussing how best to allocate the money that we have been given, where exactly the money goes, and how exactly the budget has been formulated. This part of the presentation will solve the problem of money allocation, outline how exactly the budget will be organized and distributed, and give the predicted expenses for the overall Carthage project. The overall budget for the Carthage project has been set at $84 billion, and this has been acquired from contributors as stated earlier in the presentation. This is just over half the cost of the current space station, which is currently $150 billion. The budget will eventually need to be increased to accommodate for the more gradual monthly expenses. This won't interfere with the construction of the space station, but it will contribute to the final cost. And this includes things such as utilities and maintenance, food and water, and just general upkeep. As I said for the previous slide, the current International Space Station costs around $150 billion to make. For the Carthage Space Station, $70 billion out of our total $84 billion will be assigned to the actual development of the space station. This includes things such as the materials for construction and its creation, the spaceports that will be an integral part of the space station, the drone program, the electrical and computer systems, recycling systems such as oxygen, water, and waste, and solar power. The von Braun wheel, which is an integral part of the overall space station, is included within this development cost. This is a chart that shows how exactly the budget will be distributed. As stated earlier, the current budget is set at $84 billion, and the cost for the research and development of the Carthage space station is set at $70 billion. This is just to give a visual representation of how the budget is distributed, and it will be updated as the presentation goes along. We need to decide how best to get into space and how costly that method would be. Thankfully, the job can be outsourced to SpaceX, and over the years, they have been making it easier and more cost-effective to get into space, as they've been making their rockets cheaper. The current price of the Falcon 9 rocket by SpaceX is $67 million per rocket. To get everything into space that is needed for the Carthage space station, it will need around 9 launches. 67 million times 9 launches gives $603 million for the total cost of the rockets needed to get into space. The cost of the SpaceX rockets needed to get everything into space has been added to the budget chart. The current expenses has also been updated, and we are still currently under budget. Next, we need to make sure that the Carthage space station is actually able to be lived on. In order for the space station to be livable, it is going to need food, water, oxygen, and power. Oxygen and power are covered within the price of development for the space station. Oxygen is generally covered with minimal shipments and the air recycling system, and power is covered by the solar panels and any related machinery. Food and water would still need to be delivered to the space station on a somewhat regular basis, even with the recycling systems. As far as the cost of water is concerned, it costs about $10,000 for a single bottle of water in space. One standard 16.9 ounce water bottle, as seen in the picture, is about 1.05 pounds. For the current space station, NASA sends up water approximately every 3 to 6 months. The amount of water per bag is 90 pounds, and each shipment is worth 400 pounds. For the price listed here, we will be focusing on the shipment. This means that for one shipment by NASA for the current space station, there would approximately be 381 bottles of water shipped into space. If every bottle costs $10,000, then excluding the cost of the rocket getting into space, the total cost of that water is approximately $3 million, almost $4 million per shipment. The price would be similar to the Carthage space station, assuming a similar number of astronauts at the start of the Carthage program. As for the cost of food, it costs about $10,000 per pound to send something into space. Each launch would carry about 3.8 pounds of food and 1 pound of packaging per astronaut for each day of the mission. The astronauts need to have 3 meals a day. With all of this in mind, the total cost of a day's worth of food for one astronaut is approximately $150,000. Per month for one astronaut, that is a little bit over $4 million. For 5 astronauts, that's almost $22 million. The cost of water and the cost of food have been added to the budget chart, and for the current expenses, it is still well under budget. This is the same chart that was seen earlier in the presentation when talking about the drone program, which is a key part of the Carthage project. The total estimated cost for the drone program is $1 billion, which includes things like personnel training, the xenon gas required, solar panels, etc. Once again, the cost of the drone program has been added to the budget chart, giving us our total current costs sitting at over $71 billion and a leftover budget of over $12 billion. This leftover budget would be used for any unfortunate occurrences that develop during the duration of the Carthage project, such as if a rocket fails to take off and we have to make up the cost, or if the research and development needs more money than what we originally planned for. Overall, the Carthage space station is entirely feasible within the current budget, and excluding any monthly expenses, the Carthage space station is underneath the budget, leaving some room for extra expenses. Thank you for listening to the finance section. And thank you for listening to our presentation. All the sources will precede this slide.